Gents, in terms of your various patches, what do you make of ATEC coming? Because it's going to come.
I'm gonna pass this down on that side.
Big question. Wow, that is a big question. That wasn't in the notes, Stephen. We're not prepared for it. No, it's a really good question. I mean, I think the sector is waiting with some anticipation for the full-on arrival of ATEC. I think there's a sense that we're optimistic, but concerned that ATEC probably doesn't have the resources from the outset that it will need to deal with the complexity of the sector.
Does it have the independence?
Can I take the fifth on that? We're not sure yet. We're going to have to wait and see. And speaking of the safety of this room, because this is a University Without Walls kind of like conversation, there is a closeness to the department that we're just going to have to watch and see. I think the aspirations of ATEC are great. The Accord says some great things, and there's some opportunities there that we certainly want to explore. The mission-based compact process for 26 is going to be very interesting. And we look forward to seeing how that pans out. So it's very much ask me in 12 months, Stephen, and I might have a more definitive answer. For the moment, I'm cautiously optimistic.
One of the criticisms that comes up all the time is that compacts are going to be driven by the sector, by the centre onto you, and yet it's an enormous opportunity. For an institution or group of institutions with creativity and wanting to do a new thing, it's a huge chance.
And that's certainly the conversation we're having at RMIT. I don't know how much colleagues know, but we're a dual sector. So very much the tertiary harmonisation piece is something that we're very keen to explore. We also are an access university, so finding ways to really reach out to our low SES cohorts. And having the ability to think about a mission-based compact almost with fresh eyes, because it probably wouldn't be unfair to say that the compacts in the past have been a tick and flick kind of, you just roll it over kind of thing. We're really treating the 27 one as, okay, what can we do that's different? How can we actually address the challenges? I mean, getting to 80% of participation is non-trivial. It's not going to happen in my lifetime, at least not my working lifetime. And we do have to think about serious questions. What does that actually mean? I mean, I noted Barney said qualification today. I'm nervous that really what we really should be talking about is decent participation rather than qualification, because do we really need 80% of the population with 3-year degrees, or do we really want engagement with learning so that they're prepared for the world that's twisting and turning in ways that we don't really understand? I've said enough. Mitch.
Parenthetically, of course, you're still thinking a world of formal qualifications, which yes, the sector is, and that's manifestly doesn't apply everywhere anymore. James Cook, has got a very different challenge to our RMIT.
We do have a very different challenge. So for people who don't know, we're a mission-based university to serve the tropics, North Queensland. Absolutely enormous catchment area. About 2 weeks into my job at JCU, I've been there 7 months. I went on a listening tour with the Vice-Chancellor. Listening tour for us means chartering a small plane. We went over to Mount Isa, up to Mornington, which is in the Gulf, across to Doomadgee. That's not all of our catchment. We go all the way up to Cairns, down to Mackay.
Singapore.
Up to Singapore. Excluding Singapore, that's much bigger than the Ukraine. Like, it's an enormous catchment. Some of the communities there are perhaps the most disadvantaged in Australia. One of those areas where we visited, the attendance at primary school is about 20%. So enormous challenges for us. We're really optimistic about the ATEC to recognise the challenges of being a seriously regional university. And we do very, very well. So retention rates are at parity with most of the major metros. Our employability outcomes are far better, depending on the metrics. Top 5 certainly across Australia, number 1 in Queensland. 80% of our graduates within the professions, so medicine, stay in the regions. That's because we train people in the regions where they need to be. That's where they stay. But we're optimistic. Yes, we'll leave it at that.
Richard, this is your members are going to the people who inherit this system,
Yep.
who have to drive it and change it, make it build. Are people talking to you? Are people talking to CAPA's members?
Yes, I think CAPA's job here is to say things that the university sector can't say. So I guess like for us, we are worried that ATEC is going to be a rubber stamping, organization that doesn't actually actively transform the sector, like in a way that we expect the Accord to bring us. We're also currently a little bit concerned about where ATEC actually fits. So how is it going to work with TEXA, for example? How is it going to work with other community and sector-wide organizations? The idea is great. Like ATEC is great. Like it's an opportunity for us to see some changes and differences for the next generation, but we're just not seeing a lot of thought by policymakers into like the power that is going to be invested in ATEC. I was actually really glad to hear that the Job Ready graduates program is on the radar of ATEC, and it is something that ATEC is actively discussing alongside the sector, because that is something that is affecting a lot of our current members across Australia who are in the arts and humanities discipline. So I'm not really sure if I answered your question, but yes, like students are aware.
I'm a journalist. I get used to people not answering questions.
Oh,
I mean, but not to dwell on ATEC, but let us dwell. If it is powerful and responsive, if it is as everybody hoped it would be, and the phrase stewardship keeps coming up, if it is that, then it can be an enormous resource for you. But is it going to be up to you, not you three individually, it's going to be up to you to stop it just becoming yet another form of Brezhnevite ministry?
It certainly is up to us. Barney spoke about the work that's being done around professionalisation of education across the sector. My worry is that will just become a compliance exercise. We have very good evidence across higher education now for 20 years that the things that make a big difference is moving students towards active learning and redesign of assessment. I don't hear those discussions happening. It's more around a series of standards for educators and other things that could very well become compliance. Not to say that it's not important to raise the educational standards and the standards for teaching, but that's more a reputational thing. The evidence that we do have suggests the other things that I mentioned, active learning, movement towards redesign, particularly in the light of AI, is where we should be putting all of our efforts.
I think you've opened the door for something there, Mitch. I'm not going to necessarily go there, but and I know Kerry Lee's not on this conference, but it'll be interesting to get the TEXA view on some of these conversations, Stephen. I guess from my perspective, yes, it is probably down to us, and there's different layers of engagement. The VCs are clearly speaking to the department. We speak to the department at different levels. The danger, I think, is if it were to get too politically driven, that it loses the educational ambition that we want. So again, without speaking a little bit provocatively, everyone's an education expert because everyone went to school. And everyone who's a Minister of Education knows how universities should be run. And everyone who's in Parliament knows what should be taught at universities and how it should be taught. The danger that we always face is if those, shall we say, anecdata drivers are pushed upon us because they are seen to be the panaceas for the challenges of the sector, and the political, shall we say, imperative is so great that institutions find it difficult to resist. And because the funding is so tied up, it's very hard to resist some of those political kind of like pressures.
But that's exactly what Luke Shee from Universities Australia said in his evidence to the Senate committee, that we want to take education out, the politics out. It's what Margaret Gardner, when she was Vice Chancellor of Monash, said 2017, when she floated the idea of stewardship to stand in the way. Back then, it was a bunch of nutso conservatives who had wacky ideas about free speech on campus, which was never really a crisis. Now it's a whole bunch of different stuff, which is good, but that does raise the question politically. How do you actually take politics out of a major source of Commonwealth expenditure that people think they are actually have a right to think on?
I don't think you can. I think that's the tension. It's like you can't take the politics out. You have to engage with it without losing your values and without losing the aspirations of not only just your institution, but the sector. And I do note, I don't know, everyone's read the Accord, but everyone seems to have forgotten that the first sentence around the purpose of universities is to underpin a strong, equitable and resilient democracy. You know, everyone skips over that bit and goes to the bit about, you know, supporting the economic gain, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's something to be said for reinvesting universities with the purpose and ensuring that we stay true to, you know, 1,000 years of history and making sure that we continue to do the things that we should be doing, and we continue to retain the distinctiveness of universities. You know, we might be billion-dollar businesses, but we're not banks. We do something different, and we need to make sure we continue to do that differently.
Well, it seems to me that people from Ukraine here are trying to do much the same thing in rather harder circumstances.
Their challenges are much tougher than ours, but there are some alignments in the challenges.
Yeah, you're talking about license.
Yes.
Has the not your institutions individually, but in general, is the sector's license at risk?
It's really interesting. I'm sure we've all been at those social occasions where you're pulled up by your next door neighbour who says, "Oh, universities, my son-in-law's sister went to a master's at Melbourne and she was the only white person in the class, and it's terrible what universities are happening," and blah, blah, blah. And then 5 minutes later they say, "Oh, and my kid's in year 12. How do they get into RMIT?" And so it's like there's this bifurcated kind of like absolute social license on the one hand. There's an entire culture built around universities. You know, you just have to read, you know, in Melbourne it's The Age, in Sydney it's the Herald, and it's like in November it's all about ATARs, it's all about universities, it's all about that. There's an entire culture. There is absolute license there. There is nothing that's going to stop you know, Mr. and Mrs. Smith from Bellevue Hill sending their kid to the University of Sydney. That is culturally embedded, and they have absolutely social license. UC has absolute social license to give Mr. and Mrs. Smith's kid their law degree.
Is it easier in the regions?
No, it's certainly not easier in the regions. Reflecting back on my time at UTAS, some serious pedagogical work that we did for the good of students was used by people who were resistant to the move to the city. And you know, it's quite remarkable how things that universities try to do for the good of the community and for their students can be quite easily twisted in ways that we probably didn't spend enough time in attempting to predict and counteract. So,
look, I've been writing about that particular problem for years, and I think my wisdom to anybody who asks, because you have a good idea in Tasmania, forget it.
Mitch and I used to joke that if I did something at RMIT, academic board would get upset. If he did something at UTAS, he'd be on the front page of the Mercury.
He'd get upset, yeah. Richard, how does the idealism, the sense of a license of what universities can do, what they're supposed to do in terms of educating, in terms of research, how does that translate if you've got for your members who are looking for research careers and they'd rather all this stuff went away because they really want to get a job?
Well, I guess like it kind of goes back to our guest speakers earlier on. Like today, we spoke about how university are places for relational and community building. I think that we really need to try and change the narrative on people going to university for the purpose of that piece of paper and degree to get a job at the end as well. I think that university actually provides opportunities for civic engagement to build like leadership and building the community around where the universities are situated. So in terms of that, like the social license of operate shouldn't just be about like that individualistic outlook of why you go to the universities, but how we can actually harness some of the knowledge and experiences of the people to build like a knowledge system that is far more than just the disciplinary specific and job ready type of outlook that we have in our university sector at the moment. And so yeah, like I think that I would like to challenge some of the taking the politics out of the university type of mentality. I think that what we actually need is to try and do politics differently and view politics differently, because at the end of the day, politics is about like the civic engagement and the people, not just like those who are like sitting across the river in Canberra at the moment. You know, like we need to be able to build the capacity for people to have the capacity and will and the interest to come up with different policies and also listen to their voice. So university could be places for like co-design, and could be places where like, you know, the next generation can practice different ideas that are a little bit challenging, a little bit silly, but also revolutionary.
No. Social license. Ian Martin's from Deakin. Ian Martin from Deakin's idea. What Richard just said. It's based in community. You connected enough, or do you need to connect more? Anyone?
You can always connect more. JCU's mission, as I said, is really to connect with the community and to keep students within the community. And we do a very good job. And yet still we hear that at the barbecue that JCU doesn't talk to us. It's not true, but it does mean that we do need to think, to use your expression, think differently about how we engage with the community and what it means to truly engage with the community, particularly one that has been disadvantaged for so long. It's a real challenge. We could always do better.
Does anybody know how big you are in Vietnam?
I'm sure somebody does. It depends who you ask. We have about 15,000 students.
Yeah, it's a huge operation.
It is. It's. I think we're the biggest Australian investor in Vietnam.
Yeah, and it is an answer to a lot of criticism about international ed.
Look, it's the 25th anniversary, so we've been there 25 years. It's grown to be a substantial presence. It's really interesting how deeply engaged with government and industry we are in Vietnam. And to Mitch's point, it's almost an exemplar for what we could perhaps do better in Melbourne. There's certainly deep connections with the community over there. It's a little bit different because it's RMIT in Vietnam's positioned a little bit differently. It's not quite the Melbourne inner city campus. It's the Saigon campus is not in District 1, so it's a little bit further out, and it catches a different cohort perhaps than we would in Melbourne. But certainly as a successful example of TNE, it's one that we're very proud of, and one that, you know, we hope to open up greater opportunities for exchange and learning across, as you know, Vietnam grows enormously economically, but also as it socially develops. There's a great opportunity for us to be part of that journey.
Gentlemen,
just an interesting reflection on engaging with community and things like that, and kind of picking on the conversation from this morning. They were the community. Rather than engaging with the community, they actually are the community. And so we're kind of having this conversation here of going, how do we engage with the community? How do we switch from engaging the community to being the community? Just a philosophical shift.
You go, Sherman.
Oh, look, it's interesting. I mean, so RMIT's got a number of campuses, but we're probably best known for the one in the city. And we certainly see ourselves as entirely permeable. It's like, you know, the city and the campus are as one, one does not begin and end. We expect people to move through it. And, you know, we always have conversations with, you know, with our property people, because, you know, we say, well, why would we open half a dozen franchise cafes on campus when Melbourne is full of cafes? It's, you know, what do we do differently? How do we provide, to your point, a sense of place that is the same but different? So we have been thinking very hard around what that looks like, what the social innovation might look like in that space. How do we use place to develop that sense of community in a slightly different way? So it's about bringing together research, education, and community in a particular way for the city campus. Now, we also have a campus in Brunswick, which is very different. It's kind of more design focused, and it's got connections to the design kind of industries in the northern part of inner Melbourne. And so again, as we think about what does a sense of place look like for that community, it's going to be different from the one in CBD. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but there's a little bit of local kind of localization in the thought. You can't, you know, I don't think there's a one size fits all. And I'm sure Mitch has kind of similar challenges with JCU. Like, you know, you have to respond to the community needs in the geography. You can't just expect that you can, like, we know that we have to be very respectful of our communities in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, because they have very different expectations from our communities in, you know, Melbourne CBD, Brunswick, Bundoora, Point Cook, whatever. And we have to be responsive to that while still understanding that RMIT brings a particular set of values and offerings that is distinctive and adds value in a different way. So, you know, Melbourne Uni's up the road from us. You know, I think you cross Cardigan Street and, you know, it's them and it's us on the other side. And we bring a slightly different value proposition, but, you know, you can see that there's an opportunity in that northern Melbourne CBD area for a real kind of like educational precinct, sense of place, location, community. And I don't know if there's anyone here from Melbourne, but certainly something that we've been discussing with some of them.
But that's geography bound.
It is geography.
Yeah. Yeah.
So geography still matters.
To go beyond the geography, one way we've attempted to do it at JCU, and we'll continue to do it, is to bring together people who are interested in the same opportunities and challenges. So I run Vice Chancellors. It's been Vice Chancellor's breakfast until now. I'm taking it over as the DVCE breakfast, and we get all of the people interested in education within particular regions. So there's a geographical element. And we just work through what are the challenges and opportunities when it comes to artificial intelligence now, from primary school, high school, TAFE, university, and starting to think about that as a whole system. And that's a way of really developing that sense of community. It's not just JCU leading this. We're all here together. We can all benefit from this, but we need to recognise the tremendous risks.
I want to take this to another direction as well. Like, since we're talking about community, I think that something that's often forgotten when we are discussing the university ecosystem is the staff and the students who are actually within the university community as well. Now, I think earlier this year I had a bit of a run-in with one of our member organizations, because, well, not with them, but they called me up and said, Ricky, the DVCA's office asked us to prove why student unions should exist, or and why should student unions you know, affiliate to national organizations like the National Union of Students and the Council of Australian Postgraduate Associations. Now, I actually didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to say, because I thought to myself, hang on a second. So universities are in national organizations like UA, like the GO8, you know, like all these like national organizations. And we know that like working together is a way to make our sector better. So why is it any different for students to be able to like get together and discuss the issues that affect them? on their campuses and across Australia. So in some way, when I look at ATech and also Techstar, you know, the slight disappointment I often have is like, you know, there's not enough emphasis on the well-being on the students. And there's not enough emphasis on like, you know, how can we as a sector look after our staff members and get our staff members to work with our students to build something. And I think that's probably one of the challenges, that's one of the solutions to many of the challenges that the sector has, because, you know, when we are talking about social license to operate, when we're talking about the purposes of university, ultimately it comes down to the people who are in it.
Question from you.
Yes, may I read my question? Yes. You have touched upon some of the most pressing and sensitive domains: high technology, politics, culture, data, and community engagement. And I have two questions. In Ukraine, engineering and STEM disciplines are not particularly popular among applicants. However, because of the war, we urgently need such specialists. We are facing a clear gap between labor market demand of the number of graduates and how in this situation in Australia. This first, and the second. During the war, we came to understand that data and technologies are never neutral. Any technology can have dual use implication. And currently, I am developing course focused on ethical responsibility. Do you also pursue such a need, or it is considered an unnecessary layer on top of technical training?
Second one first, absolutely. So technologies have politics. I totally concur with that. And we need to ensure that everything we do in our technological education is aware of the broader ethical, political, philosophical dimensions. I mean, you know, Mitch is a philosopher. I'm a media studies person. We're deeply embedded in these conversations. I know that at our institution, we have a number of what we call enabling impact platforms, which are interdisciplinary research clusters. And we deliberately bring together the humanities with STEM to ensure that those conversations are surfaced and part of the research agenda. So absolutely. The first question, we know that there's skill shortages in many of the STEM disciplines. And I remember being in a conversation a few years ago, and I think Megan Lilly from the industry group at the time was on a panel. And at the time, she was saying there are thousands, if not tens or hundreds of thousands of vacancies for IT professionals in Australia. And I said to her, if that's the case, why is the employment outcome data for those disciplines sitting at 75%? Why is it not at 95% if there are all these vacancies? And she very bluntly said, you're teaching the wrong stuff. And I think there's an element of truth in that. I think there's, you know, a much bigger conversation around what that actually means, but there is an element of truth that immediate employability is about particular skills that are in demand right there and now. Yeah. Whereas universities, quite rightly, I would argue, teach more than just the immediate skills. You know, they teach curiosity, learning to learn, the ability to adapt, all of those things. And you might not graduate knowing how to program in Ruby and Rails, or, you know, using whatever CAD tool that industry wants at that point in time. Our job is to make sure you have both, I think. And that's the challenge for us.
Can I wrap with one last question? That you survived COVID. Your institutions nationally switched in a matter of weeks. You flew the plane while you're learning to fly it. And you, broadly speaking, the country did really, really well. You dealt with COVID and a war, and you still kept things running. You have cultures that can adapt fast when they have to, and yet and yet it's boiling frog time. in the whole range of issues in terms of your syllabuses, in terms of the students you reach? What will it take to make for the paradigm to shift?
It's a tough question. So for context, I wrote my PhD on how artificial neural networks learn. That was a long time ago. It's like 500 people cared. Now it's the foundation of all AI. Sadly, I'm a philosopher, so I'm not now a billionaire. But things often move so slowly, you don't think there's any change, and then suddenly so quickly that you don't think you can keep up. The wonderful thing about universities is, look, they're some of the oldest living institutions in the Western world. They are very resilient, and one of the reasons they're very, very resilient, and they've got very smart people in them who are thinking about the future and thinking about how we adapt to the future. So I don't think there needs to be a radical change. We need to be seriously thinking about what these new technologies mean for us at the deepest possible level. What does it mean to be a university in this age? What does it mean to actually be a cognitive agent when you've got something that's probably smarter than us already? It's a really interesting time to be an educator, to be a university. I don't think it's an existential crisis for the sector. That doesn't mean we'll be the same as we are now in a couple of years, and it doesn't mean we will all survive.
And that's not an existential crisis?
Not for the sector, but for some institutions, yes.
I was going to say Claude Opus 6 would probably be the killer. Like we're not far away from some really interesting AI provocations. You know, some would argue we're already there, but you know, to Mitch's point, lots of very clever people in universities, and you know, my experience of being in the sector for several decades is most of us kind of work just in time. So when it kind of lands, that's when we'll adapt.
There you go. When 5 years before or 3 years before the war started, could you have anticipated, forgetting 2014, but could you have anticipated what was going to happen and how you would adjust? Would you have been confident that you would have been able to adjust?
Probably it will not be an answer, but first, thanks for such a great discussion. And really, we now, it's just several hours, but now we understand better not only Australian context, but also where can compare our experience and where can we take something from Australian experience and vice versa. For example, you ask and you speak not you, about geographical aspect of communication of university and community in Ukraine. Not relocated universities work in the same place, but we have recent experience. One universities organize conference to explain to local community and government the role of the universities in living in economic, social, cultural life in figures. Percentage of taxes from these universities in budget of the city. And the mayor of the city became very surprised because usually local people, we have a university, but we have many other institutions here. But then university administration showed this to local community. They were surprised and they became much more appreciated to this university. Another side, relocated university. Role of relocated universities for the community, even more important. But here is quite different geography because community doesn't exist in certain place. Community, Berdyansk, Mariupol, etc., dispersed not only in Ukraine. And these universities became such as anchors for all these people. And it's important that in Ukraine, this is understandable not only by local government, but also by state government. And that's why they pay attention to this relocated university. So role of university for community can be understandable just in figures in economic, but university should show this role to others.
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Last question from me. Oh, he's got one. I'll shut up.
Desert Island Disc style question. So when Yana fled from Berdyansk, the university had the university seal and the university constitution, essentially, with some cloud-based curriculum. Imagine, obviously, we're not confronting war here at this point, but you have 1 minute each. Tell us 3 things you would take,
Oh,
3
good
things you would
question.
leave.
Good question. Your time starts now.
Starting now.
Well, like for me, it's definitely you'll have to take the staff and the students. So there are no students and there are no universities without students or academics and researchers. I would take the eagerness for the public good. If I could like put that into a bag, whatever that may look like, because universities exist to nation build, to exchange ideas for civic engagement. So that's something that's really, really important. The last thing I would take I actually don't know. I think that those are the only 2 things I would really need to build a university.
That's great. But what would you leave behind? What would you get rid of?
Oh,
Great first 2.
What would I get rid of? I would get rid of, it sounds really, so I'm also kind of a sociologist. So like I would like to say I would leave dogma behind. You know, like again, like if we could somehow package that into a lunchbox and throw it in the river, and actually have the ability to explore different disciplines and knowledges like without that baggage, you know, or the expectation that we need to financially perform or live up to an expectation that is unrealistic.
Great answer. Thank you.
So I'm going to continue the philosophical theme. I'll take curiosity. I'll take the understanding that to work at a university is a privilege. It's a privilege to work with our students and to support our communities. I only need to take those 2 things. What I'll leave behind is disciplinary boundaries, hierarchy, and I'm going to steal something Sherman said to me last week. So sorry, Sherman. The misunderstanding that complexity equals rigor when it comes to academic quality.
Fantastic.
What they said. No, seriously, I think the people is what I would bring. And together with those characteristics that Mitch articulated. So I won't add to what I would bring. The only thing I would add to the things that I would leave behind is no CIOs in the room, are there? My student management system and all of the architecture around that. Can we please leave that behind and start again?
Yes.
Fantastic answers. Thank you very much.
Mitch Parsell, Sherman Young, Richard Lee. Thank you very much, gents.